Practicing being. It's a paradox because you cannot practice the beingness of who you are, because any practice is of the mind, and who you truly are is beyond the mind. So how can you practice something that cannot reach who you are? So still the practice, as long as there are habits or there's misidentification with the thought as you, is required. That's when effort is required. And if there is the urge, the yearning, the desire, the burning desire to be liberated, which is already who you are, because who you are is already liberated. You can never gain liberation. You can only remove the obstacles, that which conceal your true nature, and that's where the effort is required. So with devotion and urge and passion, you can remove the false, and what remains is the real. And when there is devotion, then the inquiry, the examination, the concentration, the discrimination is effortless. This is when you fall in love with someone or somebody, then it doesn't require any effort. It just pulls you in. The same when you examine who you truly are. You come to realize that who you thought you are is not who you are, and then when you start to taste, smell the fragrance of who you truly are, it's like a magnet. It pulls the mind in to you, to the core being of who you are, prior to any thought, prior to the mind itself. Mind is the sole obstacle in realizing the reality, yet mind is the only means to pursue the quest. We can see that actually in the mind, if we clarify, it is divided to four. The one aspect is the deciding factor. It decides between the pros and cons of things. The other aspect is actually the ego that identify with the body as the self. Then there's another aspect, which is the intellect, the buddhi, which is the intelligence factor that determines the true nature of objects. It determines if the thoughts about the objects are the objects themselves. So the intellect actually discriminates the thoughts, it examines the thoughts, it inquires into one's true nature. It doesn't occupy with any objects of the world at all. The only entity that occupies with the objects of the world, because it thinks and believes it is an object, is the ego itself. And the last part or aspect is the chit, which is all the storage of all memory, the storage of all memories of the universe and your own story. So these are the four aspects. For most people, the ego is the dominant part of the mind. And when you start examining your beliefs, when you concentrate the mind, when you discriminate, when you inquire, the intellect awakens, and that intellect actually is the only means to pursue the quest. So mind is the sole obstacle in realizing the reality. That's the ego with all its habits and latencies. And yet the mind is the only means to pursue the quest. That's the intellect that removes and discriminates the false misidentification with the mind, and that intellect disappears into the self. The self is one's own being. How exhilarating it is to learn for the first time the truth of the one self, and that you are and have ever been only death. After exalting oneself in this revelation, it becomes incumbent on oneself to face the day-to-day mundane reality as well. In fact, after getting a glimpse of the revelation, one's awareness becomes keener, and therefore one feels even more responsible for the discharge of one's responsibility. If we look at, once you realize that who you are is the self, and everything you think, you feel, you project, you take to yourself to be is not real and not even you, then your own responsibility is to start examining it, looking into who you think you are, what you think you are, and then as you examine it diligently, discriminate, inquire to where the thoughts arise from, examining if the thoughts are real, if what you think you are is who you truly are, then realization dawns on itself by itself. From one angle, the mind seems invincible, and all in all, it thinks, it wills, it acts. It is commander-in-chief of the individual. Many do not even care to know the difference between body and mind. For them both are the same, but in truth, body is the gross principle, one can feel it. Mind is the subtle principle, one can only infer it. And self is the spiritual principle, one can only be it. Are these three different and separate entities? It's a good question. People sometimes, when they hear the knowledge and they start being exposed, they start to react. Why is it the knowledge breaking it apart? Why is it important to separate the body from thoughts and thoughts from the silence of who you are? It's all one. Yes, that's true. The thoughts are not separate from the silence, obviously, because they appear and disappear within the silence. The waves are not separate from the ocean, both are water. Yet if one cannot separate the thoughts from the silence within, then what happens? I cannot recognize that the silence is the source, and then that the thoughts are dependent on the silence to appear and disappear. Also, if I cannot separate the silence from the thought, I think that what I think is who I am, instead of realizing that there are no thoughts, then who I am remains. And whether thoughts appear and disappear, it has nothing to do with me, because I am, as silence, have no relationship with any thought, word or action, yet the silence is one with all of it. So it is important to separate between the thoughts and silence, and then thoughts, then the body, because the I thought thinks and believes it is a physical body, and then it is deluded, believing it is an object. So it is important to discriminate. And I mentioned before that the intellect determines the true nature of object. It determines if the thoughts about the object is the object itself. And thoughts are subtle and objects are gross. Thoughts and objects are not the same. They are totally different. Objects don't exist independent of thoughts, So when there are no thoughts, there are no object. And whatever thought you have, this is the world for you. And if you believe the thoughts to be real, then the world for you, in whatever state of mind you have, that's the reality. When in fact, the reality of who you are is beyond any thought, concept, or story you have about yourself or the world itself. So I'll just repeat. Many do not even care to know the difference between body and mind, for them both are the same. But in truth, body is the gross principle, one can feel it. Mind is the subtle principle, one can only infer it. And the self is the spiritual principle, one can only be it. Are these three different, separate entities? One has to examine and see for themselves.